Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, and perhaps even good evening. Thank you so much, everyone, for dropping by and joining me for another super exciting In the Studio with DAZ 3D. I think that's just a killer title. I don't remember who came up with that, but I think I absolutely love it. It really describes what we want to do. So thank you so much for wonderful turnout across 3 different platforms today: YouTube, Facebook, and new to the mix, Twitch. Travis and I have set up a Twitch channel, so if you prefer to watch on Twitch, you can do that. You can watch on Facebook and you can watch on YouTube. And if you're watching live or if you're watching the pre-record, it doesn't matter. You're all very welcome to join me today. Wonderful to see you all. So today, I actually last time in the last episode of In the Studio with DAZ 3D, I totally forgot to introduce myself, and I thought maybe today I'd like to spend a couple of minutes to do that before we get going. A little sci-fi project featuring Stonemason's latest Eclipse set. So my name is Jay Versluis. I've been using DAZ Studio for over 15 years, can you believe it? So that doesn't make me a professional as such. It just means I've picked up a few tips and tricks along the way, the hard way. And if you're new to DAZ Studio, I want to tell you, I do feel your pain. There is the whole 3D. Whole 3D is a complex topic, and it just takes a while to get started with it. And DAZ Studio was one of those apps that I picked up first, and it's the one that stuck with me because it really made me, I don't know, understand the subject matter, I guess. Over the next decade or so, I then expanded my repertoire into Carrara and a bit of Blender. Where that took, that was a bit of a learning curve as well as ZBrush, just a tiny bit, and Marvelous Designer. Fascinating apps. I really like them. And the more I look into it, the more I learn and the more I share tips. I started sharing tips and tricks about DAZ Studio in about 2014, 2015. And at that time, so it was about 5-6 years ago, at that time there were hardly any tutorials on DAZ Studio out. And I found some things really difficult to comprehend, wanted to make little tips and tricks for myself in case I would forget in the future. Like, you know, the audience was always a future me, and it looks like people really liked it. And DAZ approached me a couple of months ago and said, hey Jay, we'd like to do some live streaming, maybe you can help us with that. And I was delighted for the opportunity, which brings me here. My previous day job was in broadcast television, which is, I guess, why I'm kind of comfortable with all the, you know, switches and buttons and things. I was kind of the guy who made things happen behind the scenes across a number of clients: MTV, Cartoon Network, IMG Media, who distribute the English Premier League football and Wimbledon tennis to a worldwide audience, as well as, I believe there was NHK in the mix, and many other clients that I can't quite string into a sentence right now. So there we go. That brings me to you today and to a wonderful session that I hope we're going to have over the next couple of hours. So just in case you're wondering where this is all going, we're trying to turn this into a bit of a series. So this is called In the Studio with DAZ 3D, and we're trying to make this a regular occurrence. There's even a landing page now on the DAZ website, which is just daz3d.com/in the studio with DAZ 3D, and you can see the links to the upcoming tutorials as well as past tutorials. So this is on the bottom here. This is where they're all going to be, all the previous live streams. So this one included, that's always going to be here, as well as the one that we did about a month ago. You're also going to see exciting little discount bundles that I'll be using in these streams, so you can pick them up there, like Eclipse Sci-Fi Bundle. Very cool bundle, includes a couple of really nice items, and I had to have it, and I'm so glad it is now discounted. So if you don't have it already, please pick it up. It's if you want to follow along, you don't exactly have to. I mean, you will be able to use my tips and tricks without it, but for full effect, give it a shot. I picked it up because it had this wonderful Stonemason set. It was with 5 bundles. And Stonemason, I'm such a fan of Stonemason's absolutely amazing work that he's been doing over the last, I would imagine, 2 decades. Very cool. And his sci-fi environment is included here. There's also the Urban Warrior outfit that's included. This is one of the interior shots. We're going to frame up something very similar. This is the Warrior outfit that I'm going to be using. It's a Genesis 8 female outfit. But I'm going to also switch it. I'm going to kind of fit it to Genesis 8 male, which by special guest star appearance, I'm going to introduce you in a moment. Also, Yvonne, very wonderful character. and also some weapons here, as well as some great hair by Lady Little Fox. Always wonderful to see that. Very, very cool. And Sydney, welcome. Just caught you there in the chat. Very, very nice. So I'm going to be building a scene with that. In fact, let me show you the scene. It's going to look like this. This is one of the many shots I could have picked, and I'm going to talk about not only how to put the characters into position, but also how to get them dressed and how to make the alien guy here clasp the coffee and how to pose them into position. And then most importantly, how we're going to light the set. So as we're going to see, some light sources are going to be predefined by Stonemason. Those are these little surfaces here. Anything that's kind of a glowing dot that comes with the set, but it being an interior, it's going to be more or less dark. Even though there's an HDRI will be kind of shining in from several angles, it'll be very dark on the inside. So we're going to have to find a way not only to get some ground lighting in there, but also, and this is important, this is kind of the takeaway from this tutorial, is to make sure you see all the various angles of the set. So this is one of those things we're going to talk about, how you're going to bring out all the features that Stonemason's put in here. So let me introduce you to the stars of the show here. I thought I'm animating them and just let you know who they are. On the left-hand side, we have the Greylien. Sadly, he doesn't come with the packet, but I thought I always wanted to use him for a scene, and I thought, hey, this is the guy we're going to use. And the scene is going to be he and his human colleague, Yvonne, both wearing the same outfit, by the way, but it looks very different because it's such a different character. The scene is going to be alien colleague and the human colleague working together, and alien colleague comes back from the cafeteria and says, hey, I brought you coffee. I really don't know how you humans can drink that stuff all the time. It's one of those things. Very Mass Effect, just Takina. Absolutely, yes, that's right. I've been thinking about picking up that Legendary Bundle. I've played Mass Effect 2, really enjoyed it. So nice to see you guys. And just a subtle animation. We're not going to deal with animations today, but it's very easy to do that. So that is what we're going to be doing. But before we get going, I wanted to just bring home to you that DAZ have a massive epic fantasy render contest right now, and I just wanted to make sure you know about it, just in case you haven't received the message. Sword and Sorcery Fantasy Contest. Make a render and submit it. There's a massive sale on fantasy items on right now, if you want to have a look at them and maybe pick them up. I'm telling you this because I'm a 3D aficionado, much like you, and there's prizes involved, namely the first one, ZBrush. 3 winners of ZBrush, which is absolutely amazing. I have had it for several years. I don't know how to use it, but one of my commitments for this and next year is I really want to learn it. So those flip normals tutorials are definitely going to come in handy there. So ZBrush, 3 licenses up for grabs. Submit your renders and try to win. Second place, also not too shabby, $500 in cash, given to 3 winners if I read this correctly. So very cool. Feral Woman, hey, welcome. Good to see you. Very good to see you. And third place, $200 DAZ store credit, also up for grabs 3 times, so not too shabby at all. Get rendering and get that submitting. There is instructions on how to do this right here on this page, and I'm sure Brian or Julia are going to totally plug that into the chat right now. Brian, Julia, and Nate, by the way, those are my moderators today. They're going to be collating questions. If you do have questions, then drop them in the chat, and I will try my best to answer them towards the end. But enough of that. Let's get going. Do something in the studio. So I'm going to start with the set, in fact. That is what I usually do when I have a look at a scene that I don't know yet. So this the Stonemason's Eclipse bundle, that is on the Eclipse environment is in the smart content under environment tab. Environments, here it is. I've just ordered my items in the most recent that I've put in here. That is what you can do. You can do them alphabetically, but if you do that, then and you install new items, you might not always see where they are. So I'm a big fan of smart content, and when I've just installed something and I can't quite remember what it is that I bought, I go and grab this sort by menu and put it to release date. Or order date, in fact, most recent first. And if you do that, then the most recent orders will all appear at the bottom and your least recent orders will appear at the bottom. So Eclipse Sci-Fi Set, it comes in two versions. One is for 3D Light and one is for Iray. I'm going to use Iray for this. So I'm going to go and just double click this. There's also some render settings that Stonemason has prepared. And there's some camera setups here. I don't think I'll use that. I'm just going to go and use the Iray set here. Takes a moment to load. There's a lot of detail in there. You didn't get past Bryce. Oh, Bryce, that brings back memories. I've tried Bryce. It is complex, Sean. It is Cian. Sorry, I'm gonna say Cian. I hope that's okay. Yes, DAZ 3D, like every 3D program, is very complex, but DAZ is one of those that makes highly complex things very usable for newcomers as well as professionals alike. We'll see that when I come to deal with characters in a moment. So when the set loads in, so there's like things like rigging and posing and all these tools. They're highly complex things that are not available in every character or in every program that uses them. And DAZ have done, I find, a fantastic job at making those things accessible for those of us who might not be absolute mega cracks in the whole 3D universe, I should say. So when I bring in the set here, I see the whole block here, literally. If you want to zoom out and see the whole thing, you can click this group and then hit Control F, and that'll show you this whole thing from the bird's eye view. Not so much the bird's eye view, it is literally whatever object you select in the scene tab, you hit Control F and that'll focus you in on that. It's the same as clicking that little square button here. So it's quite nice to have that. So one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to treat this a little bit like a first-person computer game and walk around in my set. So I can use my mouse wheel to scroll, but it's going to take me a while to get there. So there's this icon at the top here, which is the Scene Navigator tool. You can also get that from the Tools menu. Tools menu, Scene Navigator, or Alt-Shift-F, that's the default shortcut. And when you do that, you can use your regular keyboard shortcuts A, S, D, and W to walk around. And while you left click and drag, you can look left and right. And that's a nice way of getting, at least having a quick look at it, because we're not going to be on the outside of this set, we're going to be on the inside. So let's have a look what's happening on the inside. There's a lot of geometry in here. And you can strafe, you can go up and down. So it's literally like you would navigate through a computer game. And this is just a preview. This is the filament preview. And I'll just wander through and have a look at it. If you feel better about viewing this on a larger viewport, you can just go and collapse your panels. Just click on the ones that are currently open, and then you'll see something like this. That is nice. But as it is kind of a half claustrophobic interior, the camera currently isn't quite wide enough. So I tend to go and right click on my little loop icon here on the bottom right. If you left click and drag, then you zoom in, but if you right click and drag, then you will change the focal length of your camera. So if you do a really extreme, that comes up with really extreme angles. So it's one of those things. Just make it so that you're comfortable. This is essentially like the viewing angle of your cameras in computer games, really. And this is a bit wider now, and I think that's just nicer to look at. I tend to do something even more extreme, actually. I tend to kind of, just use a kind of a medium shot like this, and then create myself a new camera with which I will dedicate a specific focal length, and then I can walk around the scene much better. So I tend to do that, create new camera. I'll do that. I'll copy the perspective view so that I'm having exactly the same perspective in that. I'll go and open this up again. There's my camera. I'll go and open this up again, open my parameters tab here with the camera selected. I'm going to have a look on the cameras tab and have a look at my focal length. So currently that's set to 36.8. That's something that I've just dialed in there with the viewport as I right clicked and dragged, but it's not a specific value. So if you have a photography background like I do, then I would like to shoot with a specific type of lens. So in my case, that would be something like a 28mm lens. So I'll just type that in, 28mm. And that should make this a bit wider even. And we'll see the effect if we go and change this from perspective view over to the camera. And there we are. At this point, I'm also going to have a think about what format I want to shoot in. Is it going to be square? Is it going to be portrait? Is it going to be landscape? Is it going to be mega cinematic with, you know, black bars at the top and bottom? So I'm going to use 16:9 for this, and I'll set that up in my render settings under general at the very top here. I might just say Quad HD, Full HD. Full HD will be fine. And the implication of that is when I do that, I can head over here to that little menu and set up my aspect frame. So show aspect frame, that will draw me a little white rectangle. And if I do that, I can see exactly what's going to come out on my rendered image. So we'll talk about render settings a little bit later. But for now, let's go collapse this and just find ourselves a nice spot. Because currently with the filament preview, this is not going to look like what our final render is going to look like. But it's good to walk around at this stage and think, what type of scene do we want to make? So there's an upstairs, there's a downstairs. Let's just get to find out what the set's all about. Oh, there's deck D cabins, flight crews only. So have a think what you'd like to portray. My first idea was to have these guys look out onto the landscape here and see what's happening on the planet, and basically have a shot like this, and then have both of them standing there just looking out and maybe leaning against the pillars, and you know, just having a chat. Alien would be leaning against this pillar, and my main character would lean against this, and they're just saying, hey, isn't it beautiful, new planet that we've just discovered, something like that. But I decided not to do that because and then I saw these stairs and I thought that's actually even nicer to do that. So I've decided on a shot something like this. And that shows off, that's the other reason why I wanted to do it, because I wanted to show off Stonemason's hard work here. He's an absolute workhorse. The stuff he puts out on his ArtStation page, absolutely amazing. You just have to look through the DAZ store on his profile, on his username, and the amount of stuff that he's built over the last decade or two. Unbelievable. Very cool. So if we were to say this is now the shot we want to use. My alien is coming down the stairs and my other character is going to stand here, something like that, just roughly. Then I'd like to make sure this is a camera that's locked in place, that I don't change accidentally. So I'm going to go and create myself another copy of this camera and make this kind of my walking around camera, almost like my perspective shot, but with a dedicated focal length. And I'm going to do that by heading over to Create, New Camera, apply the current view, which is the camera. I tend not to name things in these tabs here, only because there's been a recent change in DAZ Studio that gives you the option to change the name as well as a label. Just in case you come across this, the name is something that DAZ Studio uses under the hood. That's not something that we really see. The programmers see that. If they want to reference an object in the scene, like the scripters, they would know that. But the mere mortals like us, we would see the label. So if you hit accept now, then technically I have something called camera 2, but that might not mean all that much. So I've got camera and camera 2. So I tend to rename my objects once I've created them, only because I don't have to double type. That's all really. So this one is going to be my main camera. And the one on the top, that's the one that I've been using to make that happen. This is going to be my, I don't know, let's call it, let's give it a funky name, like a walk around camera. How's that? I know what that means. And so, super exciting tip from this morning, actually, by Brian. Thank you so much for making that, for remembering that, Brian. If I wanted to lock off my camera and not accidentally grab it and move it around and ruin my perfect shot, because man, have I done it many, many times. I click the camera and head over to my parameters tab. And then I head over to the general section here. And if you hover over all these little sliders here, you'll see that they have a little lock icon here. And those mean if I click this, if I switch this on, then this value is locked. So I can't actually accidentally or deliberately change it, which is just so handy. That means if I lock all these values, then as a result, I won't be able to change anything. So currently I can still change the Y translate. And if I were to look through my regular camera, I can actually see, you can actually see what happens if I do that. That would do that, but I don't want to do that. Control Z undoes that. So if I go and click this little lock icon, It'll just lock that slider and there's no more up and down movement in the camera. Pretty neat, huh? Yes, nodes are very, very helpful, Nate, absolutely. You can also lock several sliders at once. So I'm concerned that I might screw up the rotational values of all these sliders. So I can control click more than one slider and then just go and say right click this, head over to lock selected properties, and that'll lock multiple properties in place. I've only learned that tip this morning. There we go, they're all locked. Awesome. I'm also going to go and switch off my camera in the viewport just because I don't like to see the extra lines here. So I'm going to go and do that. There we go. Both cameras are now switched off. I can still use them by looking through them, but there's no accidental, if I go and if I were to change my viewport like this as I'm looking through the camera, that's the other cool thing. I can't now move around and walk away with that camera because it happens just so many times. No worries, Feral Woman. Thank you so much for dropping by. I appreciate that. Remember, you can always watch the stream later at a more convenient time. Isn't it just biscuits? Absolutely. I thought when I heard that, I was just, my goodness, that's just so cool. So we framed up our perfect shot, but we don't exactly know what it's going to look like when we switch it over to Iray, because currently things seem to be, well, kind of relatively well lit. They may be even overlit a little bit. That is because under my render settings, my default HDRI, which isn't actually in here, I'm going to go and tweak that in a moment, is currently set to on, and that is the one that comes with DAZ Studio. That's by default in every scene. That just gives you a little bit of global illumination. It's nothing fancy, nothing special, but it will be helpful to bring out reflections and all that. And Filament under the hood uses it as well. But Filament has to make a translational value between that HDRI and how it'll look like in the Iray viewport versus the one that we're seeing right now for preview purposes. And to make that adjustment, there's something called the Filament Draw Options node, and I like to use that. It's going into create Filament Draw Options node. That'll create that with the default values. That's all good. And when I select it on my Parameters tab, I can drop down the environment intensity scale a little bit to something like maybe 6,000, and that'll make my scene much darker now. And that's probably more what it's going to look like in Iray. But who knows? In order to really see this, we're going to have to go and switch over our viewport from Filament to Iray, and we'll see what happens. I think before I do that, old 3D trick, let's go and save our scene. Is in the Eclipse Sci-Fi set. I'll make myself a new folder in which I'm going to put all our scene files here, and this is going to be called Sci-Fi Stream, perhaps. How's that? And in it, I'm going to call it Sci-Fi Scene V1. There we go. Save early, save often, save a lot. And now I'm going to go and change this over to NVIDIA Iray, just to get a little preview of what the scene is going to look like. I can do that through my main camera. I can also use my walk around camera in a minute. So what I'll see already is that this is fairly dark. Much darker, in fact, than what I had expected there to be. And that's probably because it is just very dark in space, even though we're parked next to a planet. If I go, I'm just going to leave my main camera there. I'm going to switch back to my walk around camera, and I'll go and just, this camera isn't locked, so I can go and pan around with that. I can see that there's some exposure on the outside, but even with this, it's just too dark. So let's see how we can bring a little bit more light into the scene. So one option, and I might just use my perspective view quickly for that, and select the whole scene and just look at this from the outside. This, you can see that the outside is actually fairly well illuminated, but of course the moment we drop our camera into this whole box, which doesn't really have any windows aside from this little cove here, there's really not much we can, there's really not much light that the HDRI is going to bring to the party. So even if I go under my render settings tab onto the environment and really crank that up, like the environment intensity here, if I really crank that up to something like 5, then then I can see it is actually getting lighter. intensity or map, you can change either of them. I can maybe make it 20 even. So it's really, really bright out here. But the moment I switch back to my main camera, there's still not more light inside. And that's just because that HDRI light isn't reaching in. So I'm afraid we're not going to be able to use that. So if I, with that cranked up quite so much, I can see the planet much better. So if I were to create an image that would have that as a backdrop, that would have certainly helped. But as a silhouette, this might work. If I put my characters in here as a silhouette, this is going to work really nicely. But it's not going to work for the shot that I'm planning, which is the one by the stairs. So even though there is a ground light in there, there's not enough for that to be, you know, brightening up the scene. So what can we do? I'm thinking I'll turn down the environment back to about 10. I think 10 is a good middle ground, just in case we do ever see that planet. Is it 10? Is it maybe 15? Something like that. 15 is good. I'm gonna keep it at 15 for the environment intensity, but it's not going to be enough for the rest of our scene here. So in order for that to happen, I'm going to go and create something that I'm going to call a kind of a base floodlight. Yeah, I'm going to call it a floodlight. And even if we were to work with things like point lights, they're going to be good for accentuating things. Spotlights are going to be good to illuminate our characters. What I might use here is instead a mesh light. Mesh light, you can use a point light as a mesh light as well, and I might actually show you both advantages here because exactly, ghost lighting, that is precisely what I'm going to build, Michael. I'm not going to use the ghost lighting product. I'm basically going to create one from scratch, and this is just such a handy tip to have. There's two ways of doing that. You can either add a point light, change the light geometry, and then make that point light into a plane and make the plane larger, and then have the plane emit light upwards and downwards, and then just make the actual emitter invisible. All you're left with is very nice soft light over a large surface. That's a little bit difficult to put in place, but you can use something along the same lines, which is called a mesh light or mesh light from scratch. I'm going to start with that. I'm going to show you the point light trick in a moment. So let's do that. I'll go and switch back into filament, only because that lets me manipulate my viewport a bit easier. And as I do that, you can see, because I've cranked up the intensity of my environment so much, filament doesn't really care about that. It just goes and says, hey, I'm just going to translate that on the inside of the room, even though the HDRI isn't really available on the inside. It kind of is trying to be helpful, but it's inaccurate. So we're going to have to go and tweak my filament draw options node just briefly, so that in filament I get a better understanding of what my iRay preview is going to look like. So I'm going to go and turn that to maybe 1000. That's still a little much. Maybe 500 is better. 500 is kind of, you know, that's in the end, this is kind of the look I'd like to achieve. So since this is our scene, this here, round about here, that is where I'd like to put my mesh light. I'm going to go and make that happen with a primitive. Let me zoom out here, bring in a primitive. I'm also going to go and change the aspect ratio frame off. Very nice, by the way this this curve is added here. Sometimes I see promo images and the promo image looks like there's something outside, but when I actually load the object, there's nothing outside, and I'm going to have to take care of this myself. And this is one of those things. This is why I love Stonemason products, because he adds these to his product. So I'm especially fond of the New York Loft. That is a great product that has geometry on the outside, basically across the road. It's an interior scene, and when you look out of the window, there's actually geometry on the other side of the road. Stonemason built all that. It's crazy. Let's go and bring in a plane. That's going to be a mesh light. So let's go do that. Create new primitive, and it's going to be a plane. It doesn't need divisions. So just one division is fine. I might make that 1 meter. And I'm going to call that one mesh flood light. Or you can call it ghost light. That is also totally cool. You can do that. I have no idea where that is. So let's go and have a look. That's where that is. Is that kind of, oh, 3D manipulator needs to be switched on. Is that kind of where we needed it to be? It's difficult for me to say. Let's switch off some parts of the set and just have a look so that we can position this better. Feel free to use multiple viewports if you want to do that. Also, feel free to change things around a little bit in the set. If there's something that you'd rather need to switch on and off multiple times, feel free to group those into position. Look, these are my stairs here. My mesh floodlight is here, so let's go and move that maybe somewhere here. I'm thinking this area here, I think that could do with a bit of floodlighting, don't you think? This is where that is. I'm going to kind of just put that into place where I'm thinking my light should be. So that's kind of halfway up the room, halfway up here. And it's going to be much larger too, so it's a corridor, so I'm going to go and left click and drag this guy. It's probably a light strip is nice. Could kind of emulate something like neon lights. We'll see what it looks like in reality later. But there, that's quite nice. I like that. I might do a little bit of amendments here on the whole set, so I might switch other parts off just by selecting them. Yeah, this is kind of taking care of the whole ceiling. So I can see that as we plant more lights into our scene, I might have to go and I'm going to need a way to remove temporarily multiple objects just so that I can look inside the set. So anything in my scene tab that I've currently switched off with a little eyeball icon here, I might go and select this one, and were there other pieces? I'm just going to group them together, just holding down Control to multi-select them. Those are all kinds of ceilings here. There's some light objects in as well. But I'm going to go and group those together if I can. I might be able to go and do this. See, Stonemason's already done it. He's already got me covered. This is it here. I'm going to go and just rename that with an exclamation mark. Oops, at the front. Hoping that that's going to bring it to the top. It does not do that. What a shame. It's just so that I'd like to be able to find that easier. So if I control click on that, then it'll make all these objects go away, and that's kind of what I want. Because I'm going to have to just put lights in there all the time, and I need to have a way to, you know, switch things on and off easy. I can also move this out, so I could left click and drag this out of that group and put it right at the top of my scene hierarchy here, like so. Now I have this part and I have that part, so that will suit me a bit better as we work with that scene. Grouping, I'll talk more about that just to get organized in the scene. But the most important thing is now that we want to turn this guy into an actual light geometry. And I'm going to go, I'll switch my ceiling back on so that we see the interior. I'm also going to go and switch over to NVIDIA Iray, and I'm going to keep my mesh floodlight selected and see what we can do here. So currently nothing happens. It's just a plane that lurks around. And that's really not what we want. So I'll go over to my Surfaces tab. The primitives that you create in DAZ Studio, they have one surface that's called default. You can change that as well with the geometry editor if you ever need to do that, or if you have multiple surfaces, or if you want to create multiple surfaces on your object. Like, you know, maybe you want the middle part to have a different light intensity than the outer part. You can do that. You can define that. I'm okay with one. I'll open that up and I'll head over to the emission shader, or the emission channel, should I say, in the Iray Uber shader. That's the Iray Uber shader is applied by default in these objects. If I turn this to anything other than black, then this geometry with this surface is going to start emitting light, and that's kind of exactly what we want. So I can make it a colorful light. I could give it a color. We'll see if we wanted to play with that. I think I'm just going to go make it white for now. Click OK, and then I see all kinds of other parameters popping up here. Very exciting. And one of them is the luminance slider. This is the one that'll give you, that'll tell this surface how bright it should shine. Currently, it's kind of glimmering at a very low level, not quite a lot, but I think if we're going to go and make that 10 times lighter, still not enough. Maybe more 10 times faster. Yes, we're kind of getting somewhere. Now this thing emits light, and it's kind of taking on the character of the light that I want. It might be a little bit too bright. It might not have the correct color. So it being an interior, I think it should be something like a slightly lower color temperature. You can do that with the color if you want to do that, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go and use my emission temperature for that. It's the color temperature. I'll go and set that from the default 6,500 to something like 5,000, just to see what that gives me in character. Higher color temperatures will make the light go from white to blue. So 6,500 is kind of outside sunshine light. Anything below 6,000, 6,500 will make the light more yellow. We call it warmer. And if you make it really low, it'll turn red. It's kind of black body radiation type thing. I'm going to try 4,000. And that's kind of a nicer interior light quality that I'm getting here. Feel free to play with the luminance slider to make the light brighter or less bright. I find it difficult to deal with large numbers like this. I prefer to change this from luminance units from candles per square meters to watts, and then adjust the watt level just because it's a smaller number to deal with. In fact, let me do that. I'll alt-click the luminance slider, thereby resetting it, thereby going back to the default value, and then I'll go and change this here from luminance units. I'm going to change that to watt, because I understand watt. I'll leave the luminance slider alone, and I'm going to change the luminous efficacy to something like 100, and then I'll see how that goes. That's kind of closer. So now I have a much smaller number that I adjust here. Maybe 500. Is that something we want? Something maybe like 800. We're getting there. Making it even 1,000. There, not 10,000. 10,000 is going to be too much. Yeah, that's going to be too much. That's not an interior light. That's kind of, something's on fire here. Let's go make it 1,000. And that gives me that base lighting that I was talking about. So now we have something that illuminates the room in bulk. Feel free to shift the plane over, further left, right, further to the bottom, further to the top. Be mindful that when you go further to the top, you will see that the ceiling is going to illuminate more than the ground. So it might be the effect you're after. I'm trying to get the effect in just a light illuminating everywhere. So I'll go and hit Control Z to bring it more into the middle. But you could also bring it slightly further over to my characters. They're going to get special lighting anyway, so we're gonna work on that. But the elephant in the room, the white elephant in the room, is of course that I see my emitter. So I have two-sided lighting enabled here. If I switch that off, then the mesh light is only going to emit into one direction, namely into the direction of the normals. But we don't want that. I want it to be on and emitting it to both to the top and the bottom. But I can see it here, and that's kind of the downside. In parametric lights, if I had made this as a parametric light object, which I'll show you in a moment how to do that, there's just a little button that you can enable and disable, and then it'll just disappear. So this is currently not a ghost light. This is like a light emitting plane. So in order to make sure the plane disappears, we don't really have a button for that, but we can use something like a workaround. Lee, thank you so much. I appreciate you saying that. We can use a little workaround on the geometry pane, and up here we have this value called the cutout opacity, and that's something that lets you essentially change the opacity of an object. So if you think about a Photoshop layer, in this case 1 is 100% opaque, 0 means 100% invisible. So I could go ahead and turn this to 0, and that would make this surface completely disappear. Let's try this out. 0, enter, and dang, brother, light's gone. That's not what we want. So you can't do that. But we can use the next best thing. So as I make this kind of slightly more opaque. Let's see 50% opaque. The light intensity is still there. I mean, it changes a little bit, but what I can do is I can make this almost completely invisible by setting this value here in cutout opacity to 0.0001. And that is literally the lowest value that you can use in any of the slider things here with the values in DAZ Studio. And if you do that, you will see that there's still light in there, granted not as much, but the plane has more or less disappeared, or at least disappeared enough that we don't have to worry about it anymore. So I'm going to have to go back to my emission shader here and crank that up, maybe make that kind of 10 times higher again. I mean, that was too much. That was too much. Let's divide it by 5. Well, that was too little. Okay, fine. I think maybe something like 6,000 is probably what I'm looking for. And that is exactly hectics. This is something like a ghost light. Yeah, this is exactly 0.0001. The lowest value you can use. I think if you make it too low, then it'll just be classed as 0. So you have to have a 1 at the very end there. It's not 100% invisible still, so I can still see something here. Let's try and see if hectics' tip works, and if I smuggle in an extra 0 here. Yes, so I lied to you. It's 0.00001. That's what you need to type in there. So 0.00001, that is the lowest value you can use. And then it's disappeared enough that I can't see it anymore. So there we go. Yeah, so this is how the Ghostlight products essentially work. They come with different shapes that are sometimes more sophisticated than the primitives that we can use. But for those of us who don't want to spend the money, we can totally use this because it's technically a built-in function in DAZ Studio. And sometimes I'm always thinking, well, if it's something I can use in DAZ Studio without spending money, then let's use that. But the Ghostlights have other advantages, so if you want to explore that, please do. This is our base lighting, but I wanted to show you, if this sounded very complicated and complex to you, I want to show you another way of getting to this effect, because it's something you'll encounter time and time again when you do interiors in which you can't use a HDRI. That makes things a little bit more complicated. Let me get a little organized here and put my filament draw options node, tone mapper, environment options, and the mesh floodlight into my own group, just so that I get organized. Select them with the control left click and then create a group. Call it nothing at the moment, and then we're going to call it lights. And that. Perfect. Then I know what it is and it's kind of out of the way. These things here we could group into set. I could do that. And it just means that when I come back to this scene in 2 weeks' time and I've completely forgotten the mad professor's ideas, then at least those hierarchies will give me a kind of a clue here. This is the set. And then my cameras, I'm going to group my cameras together as well. Create new group, call it nothing, rename it after the fact, call it cameras. There we go. So in my mesh floodlight scene here, I'm going to select that. I'm going to go out of Iray. I'm going to go back into filament. And I'm going to show you that second option that I talked about. Once again, I'm going to go and make my roof disappear. And I'll go and create myself a point light, kind of in the center of the scene. I can also do it in where I'm looking from. I'll go and use the center. So I'll go and create new point light. And it might sound counterintuitive to use a point light object, but a point light object is one that you can change the light geometry of from point to disk to, in fact, to something like a three-dimensional object. So I prefer this. It's slightly more difficult to adjust its position, but it's a really nice tip and get good quality lighting that way. So let me go and bring that in, and I'll go and use the default settings. Point light, I'm going to call that something very similar. I'm going to call this one also floodlight. Just floodlight maybe. and I'll go and move it into the same position as my plane is, which is somewhere down here. Okay. Whoops. This is where multiple viewports really do come in handy. If you want to use those, feel free. There's so many ways of working. You've got to do whatever feels comfortable for you. Where's my point light? Oh, it's up here. No, that's not what I wanted to do. Yeah, it's kind of at the top here, isn't it? That's crazy. Let's go and select both of them and go and turn this. Ah, man, this is just, this is messed up. I'm going to have to look from the front somewhere. From the front with the set, look at both. Bring that down. Kind of to the ground. I thought that had already happened. I guess it didn't. So kind of over here. One of the hardest things to do is wander around in your set and make sure you don't get lost. So it's kind of here, isn't it? So the other floodlight was here. Perfect. So our floodlight is now here. So I'm going to move it up the same way as before. By the way, if you dislike selecting things in your set and accidentally end up with different objects than the one that you want to select, like in my case, it's difficult for me to select the light. You can make the whole set unselectable. So that's another thing I suggest you do, and that is, instead of that little eyeball icon that makes it appear and disappear, you can go and use the little arrow icon to make something unselectable. So if I go and make this and that group completely unselectable, then I currently can't the demonstration effect. I currently can't select anything in my viewport anymore except for selectable objects. So the whole set group is now unselectable. That's this little X icon next to the arrow. If I have a tick next to it, then I'll be able to select items in that group or that particular item itself. But if that group is made unselectable, then that means whatever you try and select, you can't click unless you pick something that is selectable, in my case the light. That's one of those things. It's very kind of important to know that. I have a squeaky mouse. Yes, absolutely. Do you know? Yes, absolutely. And I have lost my way many, many times as well. So it's one of those things. I always like to know where this type of function, every 3D program has that somewhere hidden. And they call it all different things, of course, because, you know, it keeps us on our toes and stuff. So this is now my point light. And I'm going to go back to, maybe I'll go and I just frame up my shot again, something like this. I'll bring back my roof. I'll switch back to my iRay viewport and have a look at the scene just with the point light. It's not going to look great because we haven't, well, actually we have still got our mesh floodlight active. So I'm going to go and disable that, just make that invisible. And this now means no light again. So our flood point light isn't currently doing anything, and that's because the values are too low. Let's head over to parameters for that. Under light, leave the intensity alone and have a look inside the photometrics tab. This is where we have another luminous flux value that we can crank up, and we have a temperature value and all that. We even have a light profile that we can use. I'm going to give that maybe 100,000 to begin with and just see where that gets me. And it looks like I'm not seeing anything. Is 100,000 too little? Or much more likely, the light is actually active, but it's accidentally behind a wall and it's not showing anywhere. I mean, I can try to make that 10 times brighter, but it happens to the best of us. No, there it is. There it is. I can just about see it now having an effect. And I need a value that is as high as, is it 1,000,000? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yes, it's 1,000,000. That's how high my light value needs to be. Crazy. But yeah, there it is. Might not be in the correct position. We might bring that a little bit further down. And this is totally not what the effect that I'm looking for. I mean, it looks like a point light right now, and it's really not what I'd like to have. I'd like to have the soft shadows of something of a largish geometry there. And the cool thing about the point light is that you are able to change the geometry retrospectively. So after your light is in the scene and currently emitting light from a single pixel in all directions, if you head over once again to the light tab to the area tab, you can change this from a point light into a rectangle, a disc, a sphere, or a cylinder. So if we were to change this into a rectangle, this is now going to brighten up my interior. The light quality changes. I can change the size of the object as well. So under general, under the X scale, I can make that a lot larger. But the thing is, I can't really preview this. So I can't really, once it's in place and once the x-axis is scaled, I can see how the light quality has changed, but it's not easy for me to actually make that happen because I don't really get a preview in Iray. Do we get one in texture shaded? That could be. Control L will brighten up our scene in texture shaded view. I will scale it in the wrong direction. Let me go and scale up the blue axis up a little bit to something like that. This technically changes the light geometry, much like making it wider would also do that. There's that as well as the area here. So once you've changed it to a rectangle, you can change the height and width this way. That also is possible. So it's, it kind of depends on what you prefer. I might do that. I might go and have the width maybe 50 and then the height maybe 400. And let's see what that is going to look like in Iray now. So there's two ways. You can either change the object itself with the regular parameters, or you can change the height and width of your object in the light parameters tab. But the thing is, it's really difficult for me to preview the object. So that's why, oh, there we go. So the rectangle is actually on the wrong axis. So this is why mesh lights are easier to use. Yeah, so make that 10 again. And maybe make that 100. And then the same thing applies if you wanted to elongate it into this direction here. Just go and scale it a little bit. Trying that. Similar effect, different approach, kind of depends what you want to use. I like parametric objects because you can also turn them, not only can you switch on two-sided, we want to have that emit light in both directions. You can also use a different geometry like a sphere, for example. This is like using a ghost light mesh sphere or a rectangle and then changing its size. So you can make that maybe 400, and then it looks like a softer light body that emits light. Entirely up to you. All the parameters that you know and love are there for you to adjust, like the color temperature. I think we can put that back to 4000 to get that kind of to get that interior light effect. This could be a little bit brighter still, but I think just in regards to adjustability, let's stick with the mesh light perhaps. Oh yes, and then of course we don't really want to see this in the scene. We want to have that emitter invisible, and that's easy on the area tab. You just go and disable render emitter. That's just a single button. You click that and the light is still in effect, but you don't see the actual emitter anymore, which is kind of nice. Yes, I believe he does use 3ds Max. So there we go. That is kind of our light. I'm gonna just put the flood light into my lights group as well, and we can just switch between them if we don't want to see that. If we want to use the mesh flood light instead, it's kind of up to us. They have a slightly different light quality. I kind of prefer the look and feel I'm getting from this because we're going to go brighten up the backdrop here as well. I have to kind of rush through this a little bit, but just in principle, if we were to look through our main camera again, whoops, that's the main camera? Can't be. This is our main camera? Are we sure about this? How did the main camera get so messed up? Are we sure this is the main camera? This is not what I set up. When and how did that happen? I thought it was locked. What? Answers on a postcard. When did that happen? Do you know what happened? I put this into a group. That is when that happened. I shouldn't have done that. I think it kind of does something when you add things to a group. That's not good. Let me just take that out of the group. Yes, there we go. That is much better. And my walk around camera. I think that, whoops, that may have screwed something up. Oh dear. I'm so glad we have it on tape. What was that, a bug? So now the main camera's back in the group, and now if I go and try and take that out of the group, now it's back. Why is that? I don't understand that. I don't really understand that. That happens? Maybe the group isn't in the center of the scene. That could be. That could well be. Well, I'm going to leave my camera outside, my main camera outside that, because whew, that's not good. What happened to my other camera here? My walk around camera. Yeah, that has a similar issue now. Huh. I'm going to go take that out of the group as well. That is weird. I've not seen that before. Got to be brutally honest here. Hey, no worries. Whew. Crisis averted. Quick switch. Save the scene. Save the scene. Yes, I thought I had done that. Was that not the case? The group's parameter. Yeah, you see, this is the issue. This is the issue. The group's parameters were not 0. So when I added the group, they were not in the center of the scene. Hey, that is probably what it was. So let's go and put both cameras back into the cameras group now with the group zeroed out. And now that's acknowledged. Hey, thank you so much for the tip. Absolutely. How did that happen? I thought I put the group into the center of the scene without values in there. Bizarre stuff. So I guess the takeaway, if this happens to you, it happens to all of us. Don't you worry about it. Could be parent items in place issue. Could be. DG Seeker, one of those things. I'm glad you're enjoying the crab and the mouse. I wasn't sure if I should put them on, but I thought every 10 minutes it's kind of... Those are also DAZ products that I've painstakingly animated from hand. Well, the crab I have, but not the mouse. The mouse is a Mixamo block that I've applied and then added spring dynamics to make his ears and eyes wobble and his tail wobble. So before we bring in the characters, I just wanted to go back to the main camera and have a look at what our scene looks like now, and then light out the rest of the background. So even though we have our kind of floodlight here, no matter which one we use, if it's going to be the mesh light, I might just use the mesh light for now. That just has a bit of a brighter way here to brighten things up. I'm glad I have choices here. I think I'm going to go with a point light, with a point floodlight. This has given me a bit of illumination, but currently my problem is that I can't really see much of the rest of the set. So there's a corridor back here that we've seen when we walked through it. There's an upstairs here. There's also a corner here, and there's also something going on here. So there's literally potentially 4 parts of the set that we're currently not highlighting. And although these little dots here, the little lights in the scene, they tell us that there are maybe LED lights or whatnot flashing up and the stairs are kind of illuminated. What we don't see is the rest of the set. So in Germany we say das säuft ab, that is basically drowning in its own shadows. And this is really what sets a good render apart from a bad render. If you just plop characters in here, you'll have the same issue that the characters are not going to separate themselves from the background. And that's kind of an issue, and you won't actually get to see all these exciting things that are technically inside the geometry. So what we'll do is we'll place a couple of well-placed lights into here. I suppose one behind the pillar, one in the back room, one upstairs, and then one over here. And we crank up the values, maybe even give them different color values, and then those parts of the set will be accentuated. Let's do that next. I'll start with 1. Make the roof invisible again. Not looking through my main camera, looking through my walk around camera, which might be a little bit wide here. So the positions I'm thinking about are here. This is behind the pillar. If we let's make my main camera visible, just so that we see where we're shooting here. So we have one that needs to go here. This might actually be better looked at in texture shaded view. One light could go here, one could go in the back room, one next to the stairs, even underneath the stairs here, and one above the stairs. Let's do that. Create a new, I'm going to use point lights for that. Apply the default settings. Yeah, let's try that. You are here. And once I've placed one, I'll go and tweak it correctly, and then I'll go and make copies of it. I'm thinking about here. That's nice. I'll make that, I'll leave that a point light, I think. I don't have to make that. I could make it into a sphere. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to make it 50,000 luminous flux. 50,000, and switch back to the main camera and have a look at that in iRay in a moment. Oh yeah, also not exactly on the floor. It needs to be kind of elevated halfway up, so that it could just go and show us what's happening around there. My walk around camera, yeah, that should be good. So main camera, you can, if you have the resources, you can have one viewport dedicated to looking at iRay and the other one as a walk around. I might do that in a minute. This now means I need to put my roof back on. And it looks like that's not really illuminating quite enough. Let's make that 10 times stronger, just so that we see something here. 10 times stronger. And there we go. That's a bit too strong. But we now highlight this area down here. So let's go and make it like that. And because it is sci-fi, let's change the light color into something that's kind of sci-fi. So kind of maybe green. Green is always a good alien sci-fi color, isn't it? There, now there's some ooze leaking out there, I can tell you that. So that's nice. It might still be a little bit lit, I'd say, a bit bright, but you can also just downgrade the intensity a little bit. If you don't feel comfortable dealing with these large values, you can just go and say, well, make it 50%. That'll be half the, whoops, I was accidentally put 200 in. I meant 50. Thank you. Then we just hint that there's something there. Maybe that's too bright. Maybe that's not light enough. I might just go with 80 here. And I'm going to make sure I'll rename that. So I'll call that point light back right. And now that I've got my bulk values in place, let me go back and in fact go to two viewports here, top and bottom. We'll go and look at the iRay viewport at the top here, just so that we see a little bit of a preview, and use this for kind of fiddling around with our lights here. So the point light back, I'm going to go and duplicate that because it's kind of there in regards to values. I'm going to call this one point light back top. This is the one I'm going to go take the roof off again. Roof sconce key. 3D manipulator, and put this guy, this is the copy now, into this back room here. And thankfully I do get to see a bit of a preview. I'm just going to put that not too close to the walls, because otherwise I'll see the reflections. So kind of in the middle of this room here. And that means this geometry is going to be highlit. Perhaps this is going to be the room in which we have, I don't know, a nice blue light. Maybe slightly darker-ish. Something like that. We'll see, that might be good. Next light is going to be also at the bottom, that's next to the stairs here. So I'll go and grab the same light. I'll go and duplicate that. And this one is now going to be point light bottom stairs. I'll put that kind of here maybe. It's already got the correct height and now also the correct dimensions width from the wall there. And this, I'm thinking perhaps I'm going to make that, I don't know, maybe kind of a light blue, because that could be the light from the planet that we're seeing. How's that? That could be just, you know, something like that. And now we need one for the top of the stairs. Let's quickly bring the roof back just to get an impression of what this looks like. Yeah, there we go. We're getting there. So with these small additions to the set, we have created for the viewer an experience that is quite clear. There's something else going on there. It's not just a black hole of nothing. There is something else going on, and that's going to set up our characters in the foreground really nicely. There's just one, and you can really see the difference here, because this looked very similar to that part of the image up here where there's just a big black hole. So we don't really know if there's geometry. We don't know if there's supposed to be something there. But watch what happens if I just literally add a single light at the top there. You'll see there's all of a sudden there's more dimension there. And I think that's very important for set design to work that way. So if we go and switch off the point lights, and we can see a kind of before and after effect. That's almost boring. It's kind of mysterious and dark and creepy. But even if you dim down the lights, you're going to have such a better, you just have going to have much nicer renders as an output. Like if you have a room at the back and the camera kind of sees there is a room, make sure the light shines through it, shines out of the room. It'll just accentuate the fact that there's something, and it's going to give your renders a whole different spin. Inspector Mouse is coming to scrutinize the set. Yes, absolutely. Okay, let me go and scroll this up again here so we can keep an eye on that. Make sure the roof is disabled. Duplicate my bottom stairs light again. And we're going to call that one point light top stairs. How about that? Also, I'm going to save. Ha ha ha. Yes, thank you very much, Brian. Yes, absolutely. Great minds think alike. I thought that's a very, very nice tip. So at the top of the stairs, I'm not familiar too much with what that actually is. So we might have to go a little bit closer. If you're wondering what configuration, what kind of computer I'm using, by the way, it's a HP Z800 workstation with 48 gigabytes of RAM and 2 RTX 2080 graphic cards. Let's just see what that's going to look like. I'll go and bring back the ceiling here. I hope I haven't put it. Yeah, there we go. I think we're right slap bang in the center of this. And we'll see if that's now blue. I'm thinking, I mean, blue is nice. That's kind of cool. I can see the light up here. I think I'm going to go and move that over here onto the railing so that the viewer doesn't quite see it. And I might change the color into something like red. Like here, I'm thinking. And that just hints at this geometry. I might make that a little bit lighter. I'm also going to make it red. Or kind of something warm. This looks more like as if there's some danger going on there. Maybe I'll make it slightly less bright. Yeah, I'm not sure about the color. I could literally, this is where I literally spend hours and hours thinking, maybe I'll try this out, maybe I'll try that out. You see, I don't like that either. Maybe pink. Yeah, Roxanne's put on the red light up there. And let's go make it a bit brighter. So maybe 150, 160, something like that. That might be a bit too much, but you know, hey, if it's a cyberpunk scene, this is how you do it, baby. Now that really accentuates our set, and you can play around with the colors. I'm not going to do that because we have yet our characters to put into place, and we haven't quite done that yet. So let's go and do that now. What are we thinking so far? Is this something you're kind of, can you follow along? Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? Do let me know. One of those things while I go and grab myself another cup of coffee and catch up on the chat. Mr. Patrick, very good to see you, sir. Long time no see. How is goedenavond, I should say. Thank you so much, Patrick. I really appreciate that. And I'm having lots of fun doing it as well. I must say, this is something I really enjoy. I'm really passionate about sharing tips and tricks, because I know this is difficult, but it can also be really, really enjoyable. So I can literally lose myself into building scenes like this. And it just takes forever to put them together. So it's not just you if you think these are... it takes everyone so long to do it. And I absolutely admire artists who do this times 10. I mean, the amount of work that is required to create a product like this, it doesn't matter if it's a character or if it's a set, it is absolutely painstaking, the vast amounts of work involved there. Let's go deal with our characters, in fact, and I'm going to go and switch this back to filament. And I'm going to go and change this back to single viewport. And I'm also going to go and adjust the filament draw options node a little bit, because it is currently adjusting scene lights itself a little bit too bright. So we can, on the filament draw options node, we can change the intensity of the HDRI, but also the scene light. So I've already adjusted that for the HDRI. And now I'm going to go and make the scene lights a bit less intense, because we don't really need that to be that intense. So it's kind of nice that you can adjust how you'd like your preview viewport to look like, as opposed to the OpenGL viewport, which always looks the same, and you either see barely what you're looking for or you don't, and that's really the only thing you can do. But with the filament draw options node, you can go and just adjust this a little bit. Who are we going to start with? Maybe our main man, the alien. Let's do that. For that, I'm going to go... You could literally start with a brand new scene and get your alien clothed up. Or you can go and hide the scene. That's also possible. You can just hide the set entirely. That takes a lot of geometry away. And then we can go and work with the alien. I think I might do a combination of that. I'll bring the set back and I'll drag him in to just about roughly where I want him to be, which is at the bottom of the stairs. Let's see if I can find him. And just in case, Patrick, I don't know if you were here earlier for this, let me just introduce you to the two exciting stars of the show. These are the two people who are going to be put in the set. On the left-hand side, Greylien, wearing that exciting sci-fi armor that comes with the Eclipse pack. And on the right-hand side, we have Yvonne, his human colleague, who also comes with the Eclipse pack. And she's wearing the exact same armor as the alien. So for her, it fits really well. But for him, it's you know, it's going to be a very difficult thing to make that fit. But thankfully, auto fit is going to give us a hand there. I knew you'd like that. I knew you'd get a kick out of that. Yes, Vaughn and the alien. And so the story is, Patrick, just to remind ourselves, the story is alien has just brought his human colleague a coffee from the cafeteria upstairs, and he's thinking of taking a sip and gives it to her saying, hey, look, I've tried your human coffee. It really isn't for me. I don't know how you guys can drink that stuff all the time. But she's, of course, very happy and grateful for that. So there we go. That's the story, and I'm sticking to it. And this is kind of the final render that I'm approaching. This was the one I prepared for this, and we're making something very similar. All right, let's go and find alien here. Here's a figure. I could look for him as well. He's called Greylien. Very nice. He is a morph and skin texture for the Genesis 8 figure, which is awesome. If I double click him, he'll end up in the center of the scene, but if I alt left click and drag him in, I get this little red spot here, and I can place him right into the correct position. He's going to be naked, but we might not notice that. We might get away with it. Alien nudity. Do you know, absolutely, Sarah, that is exactly right. Maybe that is, he's just gotten it from the replicator upstairs, and it's a huge treat for Yvonne. Maybe that's the story. He's roughly in the correct position, so I'm going to go and switch off my set and go and work with him here with my walk around camera. He just looks so cool. I love it when creators take the Genesis figure and turn it into something that it totally isn't. Like Joe Quick, master of the craft at that. This is not a Joe Quick character, by the way. This is I gotta find out. I gotta find out who made the Greylien, because I'm a huge fan of him. There we go, Greylien HD for Invader poses, also available. Very nice. Oh, it's an original. Oh, I didn't know that. He's a DAZ original. Oh, okay, nice. I didn't know that. Look at him, so cute. Very nice. Greylien. So I'm going to go and tweak the pose in a moment. Let's go and give him an outfit. And the outfit is, in fact, from the Eclipse bundle, and it's called the Sci-Fi Warrior outfit. Oh, and that isn't... If I click filter now, it's not going to come up because it's not made for Genesis Male at all. So this is it here, the Sci-Fi Urban Warrior outfit, and it's made for Genesis 8 female, not so much the males. So we're going to have to go and see what we can do there. I won't give him the whole outfit. I'm just going to give him the armor. So I'll double click that. DAZ Studio is going to tell me, hey, that's not something that's currently supported. And I'm going to say it was made for Genesis 8 female. And the type of the item, I'll just say none. That's okay. I can noodle this down a little bit, but none usually works very well. Also, if you don't have a compatible figure that you know this was made for, just leave that to unsupported as well. DAZ Studio will try its best to figure it out. It's building projection maps and trying its best to fit this jacket onto him, which, you know, works quite well. I think he also needs pants, very important. And same thing, this was made for Genesis 8 female. Pants look kind of interesting on Alien, and we've got a bit of poke through here, which is nice, so we'll have a look at fixing that. And let's also, lo and behold, put some Urban Sci-Fi Warrior sneakers on him, because, you know, Alien needs sneakers too. Oh, is there? Oh, I don't know. I didn't know this. Automatic clothes converters. How exciting. So there we go. That is now our Alien. And I think that's an okay outfit for him. The top needs a little fix, so I can see his skin poking through here a little bit, but the trousers do need one as well. It kind of depends on the situation, how you want to fix this. If it's really tragic, you may have to take this out into something like Hexagon or ZBrush or Blender and really create a morph for that. That's the most severe option to fix poke through. The second most severe option is that you just hide polygons at the back of this. So I could just go and say, this is the right thigh here. I could just go and hide the right thigh of the alien, and then his skin isn't going to poke through that anymore because his leg is invisible. So if I go and make his pants invisible, you see that he's missing a piece of leg. But in my case, that kind of worked just fine. So I could do that. If you wanted to do it in more fine-grained control, you can take the geometry editor and literally select the pieces of geometry that are poking through from underneath, create a selection set, and then just invisibilize that. So sometimes this approach here, while awesome now, if he were wearing shorts, then half his leg's missing, and that might not be what I want. So I'm going to go bring this back, because there's a third option. That's the easiest way to fix poke through, and I'm going to show you that. That is to have a look at the clothing item. So in our case, it's the pants, and then head over to the parameters tab and have a look at the mesh smoothing. This is a really funky, modifier that is applied to most clothing items, and it tells the clothing, hey, you're supposed to be on the outside of something that you're colliding with. So it's a clever algorithm there in the background that says, hey, you're colliding currently with a figure, and you, item, being clothing, you shouldn't intersect with that because that looks horrible. So DAZ Studio says, or the smoothing modifier says, okay, tell me what I need to collide with, and I'll tell the clothing, I'll just go take the clothing and move it out a little bit. I'll try and make it follow the contours of the underlying figure that I'm colliding with, and I'm trying to make sure these things don't intersect. That I'm just going to go and render this out just a little bit out, just kind of push it out a little bit. And there's several settings that we can use for that. Not every object in DAZ Studio has that, but most clothing items have that applied because they're supposed to sit on the outside of a figure. The default options are here, the smoothing iterations and the collision iterations. These are technically how often this process is calculated. Like, hey, am I still intersecting? Yes. Do it again. Okay, I'm doing it again. Do it 2 times, but then DAZ Studio stops calculating. And if there's still poke-throughs visible, then they're not going to get fixed. So if we increase the smoothing iterations to something higher, like 10, for example, then watch what happens. Just thinking about it for a second. Hasn't quite worked. Maybe make it 20. It's not quite working. Let's go and increase the collision iterations here from 3 to maybe 10. Kind of expecting this to work. I'm not entirely sure why it doesn't. It kind of works, but we need more. Let's go and put 20 up. It takes a moment for DAZ Studio to calculate it, but it looks like it's just not going to do it, is it? What a shame. Interactive update. Sorry, should I have switched that on? Yes, I should have probably switched that on. Well, this was supposed to work anyway. Maybe I'm going to go and select none and see if that does something. If I go and say, you need to collect with the alien now. No, it's not springing into wacky. I'm not sure why that happens. Oh, that is bizarre. This was supposed to work, ladies and gentlemen. Let me try to apply the whole piece of clothing again. Well, let's see if we can find the same phenomenon on the warrior armor. This is the armor, right? Yeah, perfect. So armor selected. It's colliding with alien. We're going to make that 20 times more. You know what I'm not seeing is DAZ Studio calculating. So I have a feeling something's gone wrong. There's something. Oh, is it not on? Ah, man, that's easy, isn't it? Ha ha! Hey, thank you so much for whoever had that tip. Thank you so much for letting me know. Smoothing needs to be enabled and on first of all, and now we're doing the calculations. Hey, that was a good catch. Trevor Hancock, thank you so much. I appreciate that. My producer just came in and told me that, so very, very nice. I hope DAZ Studio hasn't crashed. Marco, thank you. Great minds think alike. Christian, thank you so much. Patrick, and anyone who had the same idea, thanks. I think we've now crashed DAZ Studio officially. When was the last time we saved? Yes, we're all humans, aren't we? Hey, I've got about half an hour to put these figures into place. Shouldn't have crashed, I tell you that, shouldn't have crashed. But we'll look at the alien butt for a little bit and let's see what happens. Do you know, while DAZ Studio is thinking about it, did you know that there's a massive sale on this weekend while we're, you know, waiting for this to sort itself out? Did you know you get 5, I believe, core characters? This is it right on the front page. Isn't that nice? What we're building on the front page of DAZ Studio, that is just so cool. Mega deal weekend. You get vast amounts of bits and pieces, I believe, for like this core characters, up to 10 core characters for $5 each. Did you know that? That is very, very cool. Also, you can save up to 75% off up to 5 DAZ originals. Is this nice? Or what? Just wanted to let you know, if you want to do any DAZ shopping, now's the time. Today only. And also, just to reiterate, there's this massive epic sci-fi render contest going on, just in case you haven't heard of it. It was mentioned in the email, but if you haven't heard of this, even if you're not into sci-fi renders, try to make one anyway. There's some good items that you can grab for that. Very, very important. First prize, 3 ZBrush licenses up for grabs. I find that is an amazing, amazing deal. I don't know how much it costs right now, but it's about $1,000. I don't know if, yeah, it's perpetual license. So yeah, that was $900, $895 last time I checked. Very, very cool ZBrush, and the way it integrates with DAZ Studio, man, for quick clothing morphs, it is just so cool. If you need to open up a jacket better, or if you need to smooth something out, one click, item and character, post and morphed and all that goes right into ZBrush. You just make a few adjustments, you click one button, everything comes back into DAZ Studio and you render the scene. Very cool integration. So for that alone, worth having a look at that. Second prize, $500 cash, 3 winners. Third prize, $200 store credit, 3 times. Even if you're not into fantasy, into the fantasy genre usually, think about it. It's on the DAZ front page. Very, very cool. What's happening here? Are we? Yes, look at that. DAZ Studio has come back to life and it has actually smoothed out our jacket. So probably 20 was probably too much. So let's go back to 10. Should have saved my scene. Oh, had my chance, didn't do it. Oh, crazy, man. It does. All right. Trevor, the Eclipse set is on sale anyway, which is super awesome. Woohoo! And yeah, I think I'm not responding. Man, I had my chance to save the scene and restart DAZ Studio. I didn't do it. Man, should have done it. Pamela, what are we going to do? Unbelievable. Do you know, I believe it can be an existing scene. I think there's rules on there. Maybe we can find them. I think it just has to be rendered in DAZ Studio. I think you can probably use Photoshop to do add a bit of pizzazz. But most importantly is you've got to get inspired, and it's just a nice incentive to submit that render. Use any item in the DAZ store to create a static render or animation that relates to the sword and sorcery fantasy theme. So that's really open for interpretation. As long as it's fantasy, you're good to go. And as long as it's DAZ content bought from the DAZ store, you're also good to go. I'm sure they'll be okay if you have a prop that you brought in from other marketplaces. You're probably okay with that. But, you know, the point is use DAZ Studio, use content from the DAZ store as your main character, as your main scene, and, you know, accessorize it as you see fit. Post your render on the social media platform of your choice with the hashtag DAZ3D and made with DAZ, and don't forget to tag us. So that's at DAZ3D for Twitter, and I think it's at Insta_DAZ3D for Instagram, and on Facebook, I don't actually know. Then follow DAZ on the social platforms on your choice and fill out the submission form right here. See the contest rules. You're going to see how exactly this is going to work, and you can submit it right here from the front page. Very cool. Ah, there we go. 20 is just too much, isn't it? I'm going to go, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to save my scene right now. I'm going to save it as a copy just in case we screw something up. Ah, has Jay learned from his past mistakes? No, he hasn't. Dang, brother, that's cold. It is a neat contest. Eye on the prize, ZBrush. if you don't have that yet, and if you can't afford it, this is your opportunity. See, I'm going to go and crank this down to 10 because it's going to be enough, I'm sure. I think I might also just go and restart DAZ Studio. I think something isn't quite kosher here. Every time I make a parameter change, things seem to be freezing up here. It's still working. I just don't want anything to go, you know, major wrong type thing. Smoothing, I just have this theory that smoothing was probably disabled because it's an armor, so it's not supposed to be all clinging to the body. I have a feeling the weight maps are probably set up so that some surfaces are literally flat. Just a thought there, I'm thinking. It depends on the situation, Marco. I think in my demo scene, I think I had to crank him up to quite something else, but there we go. Maybe it is, let me just go and bring him back to defaults, and we'll see what happens then. Do you think, Patrick? This is kind of working okay. Let me go and bring his, oh yeah, I deleted that, didn't I? Let's bring the pants back. Poor alien hasn't got pants. Let's bring pants back. There. Unsupported is not quite correct. Genesis 8 female. And kind of fitting okay, but like we saw before, warrior pants probably also need a bit of smoothing. So I'm going to leave the defaults, just switch it on, see what DAZ Studio can do with that. And, oh, look at that, it's all gone. No messing with values required. Sometimes it's just so much easier, isn't it? Oh, what's happening here under the... Oh, this is just what he looks like, isn't it? I was going to give my alien a coffee cup as well, but because we had these issues here, I'm gonna skip over the posing and just apply the pose that I've had on him in the other scene. I'll just go and apply that because we're running a little bit behind. But if you do want to delve more into posing as well as scene building as well as world building, there's going to be another season pass coming out. Let me just see if I can find this here. Eclipse Sci-Fi scene and pose alien. There we go. I'm just going to go and put that on him. Oh, that was just the pants. What am I doing? Needs to be applied to the alien. I'll have a lot more time to talk about these things. So the new season pass that's coming out, pose alien, there we go, will include a 3-part private stream with me. It's going to be exciting. We're planning 3 parts because 2 hours is a bit rushed to put a whole scene together. We have a lot more time to talk about things that will that we can just devote more time on, like how do you put content together that you can easily bring it into your scene and back, and how can you put... What happened to my alien? Oh, he's over here now, is he? Dang. Let me just go and put that pose. Dang. Come on. Alien, come back here. There we go. That's him. Perfect. Let me go apply the pose again while holding down control. I think that is that's a possibility. No, that can't be done. That can't be done. Oh, I should have had that in my content library. I'm going to explain to you how to do that, how you set up your own little content library for content that you can save. We have a lot of time to talk about posing. We can talk about lighting. We can talk about so many things. So we're currently working on that, a 3-part series. I don't know why this happened. Usually when I bring this in from the content library, also I saved him in the correct position. So he shouldn't have left. Yet he did. Quite clearly. Let's bring you back, my man. Or didn't I say? I probably didn't save the position of the alien. So I'll go and... Oh, come on. Alien. Dude. Yeah, something... DAZ Studio isn't happy. I need to go and... I need to restart this thing. Let me do that. No saving. I'm going to go and restart it. I think that is probably important. So yes, at that point we can spend a lot longer as well on questions, which I may not have time for, but we do read them all. And if you do have questions for things you'd like me to do in future public streams, please let me know and leave a comment here on the video, even after the fact, and we'll see what we can do. Let's see if it's better. Yes, lots of coffee. That'll help. That'll help. It's a default script. You know, I don't actually know that one, but thank you so much, Pamela. If you have a link, please do put it in the chat. I'd love to see this. Purge memory. That sounds interesting. I don't think I know that one. I can also just search for it. If you know it's on the relevant, you know, marketplaces, I can always search for it. So we need to quickly put Alien in place, give him a cup of coffee, and then we need to go and bring our female character in place, and then quickly render this out. We have about 20 minutes left. Let's see if we can do that. And come on. DAZ is totally stuck in memory. Currently, nothing is in memory, and we're currently apparently having this, you know, DAZ Studio is still thinking about it. Preparing fit to information, it says, bottom right. Let's give it some time. Yes, I can see that. Yeah, absolutely. Nice. Oh, it's in the scripts directory. Oh, I didn't know that. So it comes with DAZ Studio, does it? Yes, usually, yes. I know what you're saying, Hectic. Sometimes it lurks around. So sometimes when you close DAZ Studio and then you open it again, or you try to open it again, it doesn't open immediately. So you got to give it a moment either to finish, or if it doesn't do that, like what Hectic suggests, go and force close it. Trevor, we're going to have a look at it. As soon as DAZ Studio comes back to life, I'll show you the scripts directory. Enable smoothing. Yeah. Thank you, Clara. Awesome. Very, very good. Yeah, as soon as, you know, sometimes what I do is I just start up a second instance of DAZ Studio. So while this is doing its thing, I like, you know, running the beta in addition to this, and just if something's happening like DAZ Studio is rendering, I'll just start a second instance and just go and work again in that. If there's something like, you know, preparing the next scene while one scene is rendering, you can do that. If you get yourself the public beta, then you can have two instances running at the same time. So while DAZ Studio is thinking about it, let's have a look at this and say purge. See what happens. Boom. And not purge for you. Let's have a look in scripts. Not here, I'm afraid. Let's see on the content library tab. That might be better. Under scripts, under utilities perhaps, purge memory. Oh, there it is. How exciting. I just double click it and it goes and purges things. That is very cool. Nice. I didn't know. That is very good to know. My goodness. Yes, sandboxing is a possibility. You can also, there's a script actually that Rob from DAZ wrote that you can use. I don't know if I have it in here, but I think it's also in my scripts directory. It's just called a second instance, isn't it? I don't remember where it is. Yeah, there is another one that literally, that's, if you search for that on the DAZ forums, you will see it. It's something that lets you start up a second instance from the same version of DAZ Studio rather than using a different version. That is also possible. But enough of that. Let's go get our alien some pants. Get him posed in the scene. There. And now I'm going to go and apply my pose. That is already holding the coffee cup. I'm also actually, before I do that, I might change everything to low resolution with the script by 3D Universe here. So the alien is heavy and is set to a subdivision modifier of 2 by default. And that is causing DAZ so much work in the background. So I'm going to set everything to base resolution, including the outfit. So you might see some poke through now, but it means I'm going to have to, I can move around a lot less polygons than I did before. So let's do that. And that, of course, takes a little bit of time to calculate too. So, you know, it's also, it's on our Discord server, Hectics. It is, you can search there. It's also on my website. So you'll find it there as well. Or just search it on Google. My website is probably going to come up, and that's where the script is. So come on, merge into scene, alien with the pose. You're going to go away now, I know that, but we know how we can put you back into the frame. Alien, come back here. You're not even gone yet. You're also not in pose yet. Damn you, alien. Ah, that's good to know. That's good to know. Julia, put a link to my website in the chat, then people can find out a little bit more information about me, as well as, you know, search for the script. Thanks. theversluis.com. That's a bit of a shame. I don't really know why this is happening here, why there's so many issues. But it's the demonstration effect, and it's also, of course, the joy of doing these things live, isn't it? Because you'd never get these things in pre-recorded bits and pieces. This is like, it has real problems moving the character, and I don't really know why. Maybe my pose was faulty. Had I posed him in situ, perhaps it would have been easier. I don't know. I don't really know why I'm having so many issues, folks. I'm so sorry about this. Thank you, Brian. Very kind. Thank you, Julia. Look at that. But if you have time, I have time. Let's just go plow on. I don't know why this is happening. Could it be that maybe we need to close Photoshop? Here's something I've prepared earlier. I mean, I do have that as well. I've got the previous scene saved, so I can always show you that with the lights in place. But the point was I was going to build this from scratch. And if DAZ Studio isn't having it, then I'm not entirely sure what I can do. These guys here, that's always nice to look at. This is literally this is an eye blink anti-block, by the way, that I've applied here. And just 2 poses, holding coffee and then drinking coffee, holding that pose and then going back. And then there's an anti-block that blinks his eyes. And for her, it's even simpler. She has 1 pose, and eventually I'll mirror the pose, like now when her head turns, and that's the 2 keyframes. So it's basically just 2 keyframes, and it interpolates from her being in that pose to being in a mirrored pose. It's very, very simple, very easy to do. But it adds a little bit of livelihood to that. What a shame. Let me go and close these things down. Alien, are you moving here? Are you coming? Are you coming? It's still not responding. I will use that purge memory in a moment. I'll also close my second instance of DAZ Studio. That probably doesn't help. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. Okay, good, Paul. So these things you'll encounter sooner rather than later, that things don't work, they crash, they hang, and it's part of the game. 3D means huge overhead for your computer, even the simplest things. There's something else I want to do in the draw settings pane. There's something that means my subdivision updates are either continuous or delayed. And I think with so much subdivision in there, I mean, I've switched that off now on the alien, but if I go and turn that into delayed, DAZ Studio isn't going to calculate the subds on every frame as I move it, so that, fingers crossed, should move this thing a bit faster, but it doesn't. Ah, what a shame. So I don't really know what it is. This obviously, when I built this scene for real, or in preparation for this wasn't like that. It didn't happen like this. So it's not a skull crack. Actually, I made this animation literally last night and let the computer render overnight. It's a hair. It's not a crack in the skull. It's actually just the hair. So the hair should have been just a little bit more fitted to the head. I didn't do that. And yeah, it's just no good. Tell you what, we'll go and close this program down. Start it up again, and we'll pose alien in situ. It's just going to be a very, very quick pose. I also have, we can try the beta. Maybe the beta works better. Let me just go and use the beta. Slightly ahead of the release version. And you can install these things side by side. There we go. Let's go and treat ourselves to Alien. And the scene. So I think that was an Eclipse, and it was Sci-Fi Stream version 2. There we go. Better luck now, shall we? Yes, you'll absolutely be able to watch this later, no problem. It'll stay on the official DAZ YouTube channel, and we're going to clip it up on Twitch as well. On Facebook, it's also going to be available at least for a couple of months. I might even just go and take this bit out, like the 45 minutes us starting and stopping DAZ Studio. I might do that, one of those things. I don't have any rendering problems at all, no, not at all. I've got posing problems, no rendering problems. Yes, indeed, Pamela. Yeah, exactly. That is what I'm gonna do. I thought I had switched that off, but it was on continuous on my release version. The beta, by the way, saves its own properties. So it saves its own interface. It saves its own values. So what you have switched on in one might be switched off in the other, and so forth. This is still preparing fit to information. Dang, come on, baby. What else? Don't forget to save. Okay, I'll make sure I'll remember that. Yes, thank you, Julia. Absolutely. Yeah, I could do that. I mean, the set and all that is still in play, so I'm hoping that it'll just come back, and I'll just, like you say, I'm just going to go pose the alien in place. I'm not going to load my pose on him. Come on, dude. Good thing we have the mouse to keep us company, huh? That was actually fun to do. Usually I don't have these problems. So usually this is all very smooth. I hardly have to edit these things out. If you watch my other streams on my own channel, it'll be, you'll see that there's hardly ever any issues. So this is a rare exception with DAZ Studio. Yeah, maybe it was the mouse, Brian. What do you think? It's still loading. Uncool. So what I had planned to do then, to just wrap this up, I don't know if this is going to come back to life or if it requires my computer to be restarted, or if I have added something that shouldn't have been in the, oh, there we go, that shouldn't have been in the scene. Let me go and switch everything to base resolution here. And then I'll put his pants on and I'll bring our other character in, and then we'll finish off the scene. So what I'm planning to do is just give him a little pose that isn't the A pose. I had planned to give him a cup of coffee in his hand, but I suppose we don't have time for that. And then I'll bring in the second character and also pose her in place. And then that's basically it. Then we'll do a quick test render, and then we're done. I see something really isn't right, and it's such a shame that it had to happen on a live stream. One of those things. Could be. I haven't applied anything recently. It looks like it hasn't got anything going here either. But you know what Windows is like. You know what computers are like. Sometimes they just need to be rebooted. So, Moogler, thank you so much for dropping by. I appreciate that. Sorry about all the technical hiccups. There. Okay, can move things. Check. Now let's give Alien some pants for the umpteenth time. I see this is now sorted differently. So let's do this. No, that was recent order date. There we go. Warrior outfit, wardrobe, pants. Alien needs pants. Very important. This time we know. Oh, there we go. Smoothing appears to be enabled, so that's all good. We talked about that. Let's bring let's pose him just a little bit. Not so much by loading a pose now. I'm just going to go and dial one in from one of my favorite products, actually, from 3D Universe, the Pose Architect. There's one pose that is called Natural, and you can do, there's so many that you can dial in, and it's just very, very cool to just go and say maybe about 80% or something along those lines. That'll just make him turn down his arms and put his feet together. There's kind of walking poses. When I have something up and running that is much more fluid, I will show you more details of that. I'm certainly having major issues here. Yeah, one of those things. If this was happening not on a live stream, I would just go and reboot my computer. But I guess, you know, today's one of those days. Maybe it's the pants, absolutely. Do you know what I'll do? I'll do something else. I'll go and do what they do in the cooking show. So first of all, I'm going to open my other instance of DAZ Studio again. And oh yeah, there we go. We're there now. I'm going to, because we're running out of time, I'm going to go and open the scene I had prepared for you, and I'll walk you through that, because technically it'll have literally everything in it that we've discussed, just with more time invested on making things look pretty. See how that scene looks. So essentially it's all the same lights in all the same places. It's the same characters in there. All I did was load the Yvonne character in place, put the outfit on, give her a pose, spend hours doing that, of course, and then we can just go and see what this looks like rendered. I'll show you my render settings so that you can follow along maybe. Yeah, it's one of those things. Usually it's really not that catastrophic, so one of those things. Lee Moon, right? Yes, probably, and possibly, could be, because that's before we closed the scene. It had saved it with the high smoothing iterations, right? Yeah, it could well be. Could well be that that's the issue. Could well be that that's the issue. Could also be that I need a new computer. Very possible. Yes, if we had unlimited amounts of time, I would just literally just stay here until it's way past midnight in Europe, but it is already coming up to midnight. There we go. So it is literally almost the same setup that I've been through with you. And the, whoops, that's, yeah, you're gonna have to go in the background. And I'll go, and this is my main camera. I don't want to touch that. This is my preview camera. Here's the alien. Here's the one that looks all right. And he just got his colleague a coffee. The light setup is exactly the same, and the only thing I wasn't able to show you is the wonderful Lady Little Fox hair on the Yvonne character. So she's in place. That looks a little awkward depending on which angle you look from, but if you look through the main camera, it actually looks okay. I'll go and switch on my aspect frame. This is exactly that that picture I've made. With the light sources in place in the background. There's also, oh yeah, that's the other thing that I did in this scene. Once you have the characters in place, let's say we've done that now, I'll go and switch off my character lights here. Top light and the rim light as well. I'm going to go and switch that off. And we'll switch this one to iRay. And this is basically now after having put all the characters in. The only thing that you'll notice at that point is that the characters' faces might not separate enough from the backgrounds, and that's because they don't get direct light. We have the point lights and we have the background lights and all that, but the characters themselves, they don't look very bright right now. So what I did then is essentially add one point light in the middle between them and turn the light geometry on into sphere light, and that then gives both of them a little bit of an illumination from the front. And that's the one I've just switched off. This is it. Main light, parametric, is that it? Character light, that's the one. So if I switch that on, you'll see that there is this guy here that's just right in the middle, kind of on chest height, and the light geometry on this is in fact a sphere, and it emits enough light to give her a little bit of light, and also him a little bit of light from the front. The Sci-Fi Warrior outfit actually has emissive surfaces applied, so it kind of, that's why they glow. And then I think one other thing I did was add a rim light, and that's something that would separate, I believe, the either Yvonne or the alien a little bit further. So it's just a tiny bit of a catch light you see on the outside here. So we've got, at least we got, that looks better, I guess. But at least we got most of the process captured. I'm so sorry my DAZ Studio wasn't up for the challenge today. I really don't know what it was. Probably was the higher smoothing iterations here that I hadn't switched off. Is it on the armor? Mesh smoothing, yes, absolutely. I'll go disable smoothing here and just quickly drag these down, and then I'll go and save the scene just in case we want to ever go back to that. But you know, I think that is really all I wanted to tell you here. My render settings to render this out, just to finish this off, would be under progressive mode. I'll go, in fact, I'm going to go, 2000 maximum samples. I'll switch render quality off. This can just be on its default values. Max time can also be on its default. Maximum samples, set that to 2000. That'll give you a good enough result for this. I tend to disable the rendering quality. With that enabled, you will ask DAZ Studio to spend as much time as it thinks is necessary for the scene to look good. That works in 90% of the cases, and it'll get you there. But if you are pernickety, like I am, and you want to go and make sure it renders exactly 2000 samples or 500 samples or 200 samples, then you need to switch render quality off. Under max samples, you enter the amount of samples that you want. Under filtering, I go and enable the post denoiser, so that when you switch that, this is kind of the default, you switch that on post denoiser, and then you have to enable the post denoiser as well, otherwise it won't kick in. And that means that after about 8 iterations, it'll start kicking in. You don't have any grain in your renders, and you know, that's that. When I start setting up my scene for the final render, I don't use 2000. When I start, I use something like 100 or 200. And then before I render, I go and switch my iRay viewport off. I go either back to texture shaded, or I go back to filament, and then I just go and wait for this to clear itself, and then I hit Command R, and then I'll go and see what that render looks like. And so that's going to be a low resolution-ish preview render just for light pass. That I do that so that I can see, are my lights in the correct places? Is there hair clipping through? Is there any poke through that I didn't see in the viewport? So I let that render out. It shouldn't take longer than a minute, perhaps 2. And at that point, I can make final adjustments. And if I'm then happy after that, I go and do final render with maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000 iterations. One of those things. It's absolutely right, Hectix. That is so correct. I've heard a lot of people to say, no, the denoiser is terrible. Look, it's all blurry. I'm not going to use that. Well, the longer you let it render, the less blurry it's going to get. So the way the denoiser works is that it goes and takes the best guess at what it thinks the scene should look like, but it only has so much information to go by. So the alien's face looks blurry now. You don't see skin detail and all that, but you see a general direction of where this thing is going. And this is kind of this, you know, if you're happy, if the baseline needs to be reduced or whatnot, that's what you can do. If you think, hey, I've already spent half an hour rendering my image, and it was already at 500 or at 1,000 iterations, and my computer isn't fast, and I've already spent so much time, do I have to go and render the whole image again? You do not. You can just go and open that little tab here. There's one, it's barely noticeable on the window, so don't close it yet. On the render window, try and find that little tab on the left and open that up and have a look at your progressive render settings here. You can increase the renders now. So imagine these were 1,000 renders. It took me 2 hours to do, and I'm thinking, yeah, another 1,000 would have really been and would have been great. I can go and increase that. I'll just use 500 now, and then I go at the very bottom. I find that my button has turned into resume, and that means now I can go and just resume the render, and that means DAZ Studio is going to start with the 101st render, or the next iteration. Just keep rendering and keep improving your picture, and that's really nice because that means less wasted render time, and the denoiser is just going to get, you know, the result is going to be refined, and the longer you let it render, the better the image is going to look like. Super secret hidden tab. You wouldn't know if it's not. If you don't know, you don't know, and it's just so well hidden. I think it's a trade secret. Don't tell anyone. It is it's the best kept secret. I totally agree. Yeah, I think I came across it by complete fluke. What else was there? We talked about render settings. Sorry we couldn't talk about posing. We talked about smoothing. We talked about making your set look smashing, and make sure you accentuate the geometry that is in the background. Make sure you don't, if there is anything, it doesn't matter if it's a room that has a kink in it, like from, you know, like say you had a kitchen scene, or you had like a what's it called here, like a living room scene, and you know there's another room and there's a door that's open. Make sure that's not just a black hole. Make sure there's a light shining out from that room. Accentuate geometries. Make sure your characters have something like a little catch light around them, that they separate themselves from the background. And then last but not least, and we talked about this in the previous stream, make sure you add just a tiny bit of depth of field into your renders, because that once again bring out your characters against the background. If the characters and the background are all in focus, then these stairs here, they might just blur into the character. This is a better example here. This is out of focus. The ceiling's out of focus, and the viewer is being redirected to the character rather than the geometry on the ceiling, which in this case I don't really want to see. We can increase the depth of field. Let's try that and see what that looks like, and see what it would look like slightly more blurred. I think we have a little bit of time for that. Let's do that. So under cameras, my main cam, under parameters, under camera, there's my depth of field option here. That's enabled, and if it's not enabled, then everything will render in focus. So enable that, and the f-stop, I've set it to 64. Let me go really extreme here. Let me go maybe 16. The lower you set this value, the blurrier the depth of field is going to look. And then just rendering and see what it looks like. We get an impression after a few iterations. We'll see if the characters are in focus, if the focal plane is adjusted properly. If it isn't, we'll just make adjustments, and there we go. Are they? Trevor, thank you so much. That's really good to know. I need to go shopping later. And thank you so much, everyone, for hanging in there and sticking with me. We want to make this a monthly occurrence. Monthly, maybe every 6 weeks. We'll see how we do it. So that's planned. I'm really excited to build more scenes with you. Maybe look at animation. Maybe look at other workflows, like how do you get Marvelous Designer into the workflow? How do you get ZBrush into the workflow? How do you get Blender into the workflow? How do you use the bridges? How do you get Unreal Engine involved? How do you build more scenes, maybe exterior scenes? How do you do posing? There's so much we can talk about, and I'd love to do this with you, and I'd love to share it all with you. And we're gonna make it happen. It's going to be wonderful. And see, this is more depth of field now, and it's drawing much more attention to the characters. I think the focal plane isn't quite correct, so she is rendered a little bit out of focus, so we'd have to take care of that. But that's just a matter of changing the focal plane, and you know, cracking on with that. I might actually just do that. Let's do that. How do we adjust the focal plane, Jay? Good question. And for those of you who liked the the season pass last time, do consider purchasing the next one. It'll have some content that you'll get, but the overwhelming majority, I believe, who took the survey, who said, what would you like to see more of at DAZ? The overwhelming majority said we'd like educational resources, and DAZ are great. They are listening to that and they're saying, hey, this is what our customers want, this is what we're going to give them. The Flip Normals addition to the DAZ store is one step in that direction. If you're serious about content creation, those are great tutorials to look at. But I am also part of that, so they asked me, can you do this for us? And this is the reason why I'm here, and I love doing it. So there we go. They listened. You told them, they listened. Now they're giving it to you. That's the way to look at it. So camera focal plane. It's only visible in the texture shaded view. So let's go into that. It is also you need to do that because that's the only one that shows you the lines and the markings. Control L will give you preview lights in here. I'm going to go look from the top at this, and I can see my ceiling is in the way. I wasn't as clever in hiding my bits and pieces as I was in the stream that I just showed you. So with my characters showing, I also need to see my camera. That's the main camera here. There it is. So this isn't visible in filament at the moment. So you have to select your main camera or the camera you're rendering through, and then you'll see these markings if depth of field is enabled. If it's not enabled, then these lines are gone. You'll only see one plane, which is the frame of what the camera sees. But if you switch this on depth of field, you see these two boxes technically, and that is what's rendered in focus, and anything that's outside it is rendered blurry technically. So this is you can set two things. You can set the width between those planes, and you do that with the f-stop value. So a smaller aperture will mean more will be rendered in focus, and a smaller aperture will mean that this area of what is rendered in focus is much smaller, so more stuff is rendered blurry. So the way my camera is framed up, I think I can probably get away with something like this, maybe. That's one thing. But then you can also set where this focal plane actually is, and that is the focal distance. So as you move that, the portion of what's rendered in focus kind of moves. So I think that's why I had it set to something like 64, because that means both Yvonne and the alien were rendered in focus. I think I can probably get away with something smaller than that, but you want to make sure that the characters end up in between here, or at least the character that you want to add a bit of focus to. So I'm going to make it deliberately smaller here, and then just make sure at least Yvonne is rendered in focus. This means the alien is now going to be rendered out of focus, but it's going to be all right. Just for quick demo, Control R, that should show you that. Bottom step alien hill. I didn't see anything. Sorry, and I wasn't ignoring you. There's just a lot of messages, so nothing personal. And since his heels were, if there's something wrong with his heels, I wasn't framing them in, so I usually don't tend to worry about things that are not being shown on the final render. Oh, like, you know, the roof. Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's go and put the roof in, shall we? That should be on the final render. Otherwise, we have that very bright HDRI, which we don't want to look at. Yes, where was that? There was that, and there was that. Perfect. Absolutely. Flip Normals, Dreamlight, Digital Art Live, Dark Edge Design. Yes, they're all really good tutorials. And of course, the plethora of videos you find on YouTube these days. I remember when I started making videos on DAZ Studio, there was hardly anything that were usable resources, and now more and more users are sharing how they're creating, what they're creating, and it's wonderful. It is, I think, for me, seeing other creators' workflow is really just a big eye-opener. I'm hoping that's the other thing that we're tentatively planning and thinking about. I'm hoping that we can do sessions with two people, that, you know, maybe I have a live link with somebody who shares their computer screen and we discuss their workflow. I know that not everyone is comfortable in front of the camera, so I'm happy to lend a hand and we can maybe do this together. I would love to see other creators sharing their experiences building scenes like this, see their workflow, even their content creation workflow. It's going to be exciting, and you know, it's a bright future for the DAZ YouTube channel. Tell you, it's going to be great. It's going to be really good. I created chain reaction, exactly. So there we go. Like predicted, the alien is now out of focus. Things are more blurry, but she's in focus. So just to wrap that up about how you adjust the focal planes. My friends, I'm gonna say thank you and goodbye, not in so many words. I will also leave you with these two guys here, because I really like that little animation that I've made here. So I'm gonna leave you with these two guys as I say goodbye. Thank you so much for watching. I had a blast. There's gonna be another workshop in about 4 to 6 weeks, and there's gonna be that season pass that's coming out. Consider doing that. We're gonna talk about scene building. We're gonna talk about content, how it's saved, how you can save your own content. We're going to talk about posing more, and we're going to talk about putting a scene together. And we're going to have literally 3 2-hour episodes with time for questions. I will look at everything that my mods have fielded, and if you do have more questions, then please leave a comment on this video below. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend. Happy rendering, and I will see you very hopefully next time. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.